February 20th, 1943. Kasserine Pass, Tunisia. The needle on the fuel gauge hovered near empty as Colonel Hans Georg Hildebrandt's command vehicle crested the ridge overlooking the abandoned American supply depot. The commander of the 21st Panzer Division lowered his field glasses twice, sure the morning sun was playing tricks, creating mirages across the desert floor. Spread before him lay row after row of fuel drums, stacked methodically in that American way, glinting like treasure in the North African dawn. Hildebrandt's division had been running on fumes, carefully rationing their last reserves of fuel when they stumbled upon what the retreating U.S. II Corps had left behind in their rush through Kasserine Pass. The depot held 57,000 gallons of fuel, more gasoline than his entire division usually got from Germany in 2 months. Major Friedrich von Mellenthin, intelligence officer of the Afrika Korps, would later write in his memoirs, "We found more petrol in one American dump than most German divisions had seen since El Alamein. The Americans fled and left enough fuel to run our entire army for days. What kind of enemy has so much that they can just abandon it?" This moment at Kasserine Pass revealed a truth more devastating than any battlefield defeat. The Americans had material wealth so vast that their discarded supplies were more than the Wehrmacht could ever hope to deliver across the Mediterranean. The 10th and 21st Panzer Divisions had just scored Germany's greatest tactical victory against American forces in North Africa, seizing supplies that temporarily transformed their ability to fight. But within that win lay cold, hard proof of inevitable defeat. The rules of modern warfare weren't being written in tactics or courage anymore. They were being written in fuel consumed versus fuel delivered. And those numbers told a story no amount of German battlefield skill could overcome. By February 1943, the Afrika Korps had mastered desert warfare after 2 years of campaigns that made them legends. Under Field Marshal Erwin Rommel's leadership, they'd driven the British back to Egypt, earned Montgomery's respect, and turned North Africa into a showcase of German tactical superiority. But every victory now came with a desperate calculation: how much fuel they needed versus how much they actually had. Wehrmacht logistics records from late 1942 laid bare the crisis. The German-Italian forces in North Africa needed 32,250 tons of supplies every month for their 65,000 men, and fuel alone made up 17,500 tons, 54% of all requirements. But Mediterranean convoys were getting hammered. By early 1943, Malta-based aircraft and submarines were sinking 60 to 70% of Axis supply ships. What little made it to African ports then had to travel 1,500 kilometers to the front, burning more fuel than it delivered. The desert drank fuel like nothing the Europeans had ever seen. A single Panzer Division needed 350 tons of supplies daily during combat. Moving 1 ton of supplies to the front consumed 5 tons of fuel just in transport. Tank crews had become experts at crazy fuel-saving tricks, coasting down slopes with engines off, push-starting vehicles to save batteries, siphoning fuel from damaged tanks like their lives depended on it, because they did. Rommel himself admitted in January 1943, "Our operations are decided more by the petrol gauge than by tactical plans." This wasn't an exaggeration, it was math. At El Alamein, the Afrika Korps had only 3 days of fuel left when Montgomery attacked. By February, even closer to supply ports, things had gotten worse. Dawn, February 14, 1943. Field Marshal Rommel and General Hans-Jürgen von Arnim launched their coordinated offensive against American forces holding central Tunisia. Operation Frühlingswind, Spring Wind, sent General Friedrich von Breuch's 10th Panzer Division and Colonel Hildebrandt's 21st Panzer through the narrow pass towards Sidi Bou Zid. This was the Afrika Korps's last big armor attack, a desperate bid to disrupt Allied preparations before their material superiority became unstoppable. The attack caught the Americans completely off guard. More than 100 German tanks and assault guns, backed by mechanized infantry, smashed into positions held by the U.S. 1st Armored Division's Combat Command A. The Americans were spread out on hilltops, unable to support each other. Their M3 Grant and Lee tanks, with high profiles and hull-mounted main guns, were sitting ducks for German combined arms tactics honed over 3 years of war. Lieutenant Colonel John Waters, commanding the 1st Battalion, 1st Armored Regiment, lost 44 of his 51 tanks in the opening fight at Sidi Bou Zid. The destruction was systematic. German veterans pulled off textbook moves while American crews, many in combat for the first time, charged piecemeal into concentrated fire. But even in victory, fuel was top of mind for the Germans. Panzer companies had to abandon working vehicles simply because they ran out of gas. The irony stung. They could destroy the enemy but not chase them, win battles but not exploit them, all because the fuel gauge hit empty. February 17, 1943. As American forces fell back toward Kasserine Pass, they left behind supply depots set up according to U.S. Army doctrine that seemed like a fantasy to German quartermasters. American plans called for one depot every 50 to 100 kilometers, each stuffed with extra supplies to keep operations going even if others were lost. German forces, who measured fuel by the liter and counted every artillery round, stumbled upon abundance beyond their wildest dreams. A reconnaissance patrol from the 21st Panzer Division found the first major depot near Speiba. The patrol leader's report, preserved in Wehrmacht archives, says it all. The depot covered about 10 hectares. Fuel drums were stacked in perfect rows, over 400 drums of 55 gallons each. There were rations for what must have been an entire regiment for a month. White bread still fresh, canned meat, real coffee, chocolate, cigarettes by the 1,000 cartons. Medical supplies we haven't seen since 1941. German troops, who'd been surviving on Italian hardtack and ersatz coffee made from acorns, pounced on American rations like starving men. The chocolate alone was more than German civilians got in a month. But the fuel was what mattered most. Within hours, vehicles written off as non-operational were back on the move. February 19th to 20th, 1943. As German forces pushed through the 2-mile-wide Kasserine Pass, they overran the main American supply network supporting 2 corps. What they found blew their minds, and scared them silly. The material haul was staggering: 183 tanks, 104 half-tracks, 208 artillery pieces, 512 trucks and vehicles, 57,000 gallons of gasoline and lubricants, and 45 tons of ammunition. To put that in perspective, the fuel alone was nearly a week's supply for the entire Afrika Korps, more than many German divisions had received in the previous 3 months. Rommel himself inspected the captured depots on February 21st. His aide Hedwig Schmidt recorded the field marshal's reaction. Rommel stood silent for a long moment, staring at the mountains of supplies. Then he said quietly, "Each American battalion is better supplied than our entire divisions. What kind of victory is it when the enemy can afford to lose more than we can afford to use?" The captured American vehicles were even more valuable than fuel in the short term. Wehrmacht records show that by February 1943, 85% of Rommel's transport was made up of captured British and American vehicles. The American 2.5-ton trucks, dubbed Jimmies by German troops, were especially prized, more reliable than German Opel Blitz trucks, easier to fix, and abandoned with spare parts German forces hadn't seen in years. The captured supplies revealed more than just wealth. They exposed 2 totally different ways of waging war. As Germans discovered through captured field manuals, American military doctrine assumed massive oversupply as insurance. Where German divisions got by on 200 tons of supplies daily, American divisions were allocated 700 tons. That difference wasn't just about money, it was about an entirely different way of thinking about war. Interrogating captured Americans only added to the shock. Captain William Baker of the 1st Armored Division said his battalion normally got 100% of requested supplies plus a 25% reserve. When German intelligence officers called that propaganda, Baker laughed and said that was the minimum acceptable level. Captured requisition forms confirmed allocations that exceeded entire German monthly deliveries. General Friedrich von Breuch, commanding the 10th Panzer Division, wrote in his after-action report, "The enemy operates by principles foreign to our experience. They assume waste, plan for excess, and see redundancy as essential. This isn't an army in the European sense, it's an industrial process that happens to involve combat." The German success at Kasserine created a paradox even junior officers noticed. The captured supplies fixed their immediate shortages, letting them fight on when they otherwise couldn't. But that sheer abundance revealed the mathematical impossibility of winning the war. The psychological hit on German troops was huge. They found medical supplies including penicillin, a miracle drug unavailable even in German military hospitals. They got chocolate and coffee as standard rations while their families back home survived on turnips and fake coffee. Most demoralizing of all were captured documents showing these supplies would be replaced in weeks. Shipping manifests proved this was just one of dozens of similar depots. A junior officer from the 10th Panzer Division wrote home in a letter that survived in family archives, "We feast on American rations while our families starve. We burn American fuel while our homeland suffers shortages. We won a battle by taking what our enemies throw away. This isn't victory, it's scavenging." Field Marshal Rommel did a complete 180 on his opinion of American forces after Kasserine. At first, he dismissed them as poorly trained with bad doctrine. But after seeing their material resources, he realized tactical skill mattered less than industrial capacity. In his February 22 report to OKW, the German High Command, Rommel wrote, "The Americans are militarily inexperienced but materially overwhelming. They learn from mistakes we can't afford to make. Time is totally on their side. Each day they grow stronger while we grow weaker, no matter who wins the battles." His final assessment was prophetic. "We can win battles but not the war. The Americans bring not superior tactics to the battlefield, but superior arithmetic. They win through multiplying supplies, equipment, and attempts. We're fighting the entire industrial output of America." After Kasserine, the Afrika Korps relied more and more on captured supplies. This dependency became a death spiral. Every advance required seizing enemy supplies, turning tactical plans into desperate scavenger hunts. By March 1943, Wehrmacht records showed bizarre mixed equipment. German crews driving captured Sherman tanks marked with Wehrmacht crosses, artillery units firing American 105mm howitzers, transport companies running entirely on stolen vehicles. The proud Afrika Korps had become what one veteran later called a parasitic army living off enemy excess. The dependency got absurd. German workshops used American tools and parts. Medical units relied entirely on captured American supplies. Even staff cars ran on American fuel while German allocations went to combat vehicles that were increasingly scarce. The captured documents at Kasserine gave German intelligence their first real look at American production, and what they saw defied belief. A single captured report from the Detroit tank arsenal showed 1,350 M4 Sherman tanks produced in January 1943 alone, more than Germany's total tank production for the entire quarter. Even worse were the production trends. American output was going up every month while German production fell due to bombing and resource shortages. The math was simple and brutal. America made 4,000 aircraft monthly, Germany 2,000. America made 4,000 tanks monthly, Germany 500. America made 50,000 vehicles monthly, Germany 5,000. Major Hermann Kohl, an industrial engineer with the Afrika Korps, analyzed the captured documents and wrote a suppressed report. "We're not fighting an army. We're fighting an entire continent's industrial output. The outcome is decided by production stats, not battlefield courage." Beyond material math, the human equations were just as impossible. The Afrika Korps was losing irreplaceable veterans while Americans arrived with fresh training and unlimited gear. Every destroyed German tank meant a crew lost that took years to train. Every American loss was replaced in weeks. An intercepted American message revealed they were shipping 5,000 replacement crews monthly to North Africa. The Afrika Korps hadn't gotten 5,000 total replacements since El Alamein. The math of attrition was just as merciless as supply math. The variety of captured equipment also became a maintenance nightmare that sped up German defeat. American vehicles needed parts German workshops couldn't make. Captured tanks required specialized tools German crews didn't have. All that captured gear became a burden as mechanical breakdowns destroyed what combat hadn't. By April 1943, abandoned American vehicles littered German positions, not destroyed in battle, but stuck because they couldn't be fixed. The Afrika Korps had captured more than it could maintain, a metaphor for their entire North African campaign. General von Arnim, who took command in Tunisia after Rommel left due to illness, inherited an impossible situation. His forces ran mostly on captured materials they couldn't replace, dependent on supply lines that delivered almost nothing while burning precious fuel. His chief of staff put it bluntly: "We're fighting with borrowed time and stolen supplies against an enemy with unlimited amounts of both. Math, not tactics, decides the outcome. We can win every battle and still lose because of arithmetic alone." As German forces retreated into a shrinking perimeter around Tunis and Bizerta, their reliance on captured supplies became total. Units fought entirely with seized American gear, creating the surreal sight of the Wehrmacht using American equipment against American troops. The final German staff estimate from April 1943 laid bare the impossible numbers. They needed 7,500 tons of supplies monthly for defense, but got less than 1,000. American forces were getting 15,000 tons daily. The supply superiority ratio was over 450 to 1. On May 13, 1943, the Afrika Korps surrendered along with all remaining Axis forces in North Africa. Over 275,000 German and Italian troops became prisoners. They didn't surrender to better generals or braver soldiers. They surrendered to the unstoppable math of industrial warfare. Decades later, surviving Afrika Korps veterans would gather at reunions and reflect on what Kasserine meant. Friedrich Schultz, who commanded a panzer company, said in 1985, "We thought we won at Kasserine because we took the pass and the supplies. But we actually lost, because those supplies showed us the war was already over." When your greatest victory is seizing what your enemy abandons, you're not winning, you're delaying defeat. Wilhelm Hoffmann, a supply officer with the 21st Panzer, recalled in 1990, "The American fuel we captured meant everything tactically and nothing strategically. It let us keep fighting for a few more weeks, but it also showed that our enemies measured fuel in shiploads while we measured it in drums. We were fighting infinity with finite resources." The real significance of Kasserine Pass isn't in the tactical moves historians argue about. It's in the simple math revealed by the captured supplies. German monthly fuel allocation, 12,000 gallons, when delivered. American fuel captured at Kasserine, 57,000 gallons. American monthly fuel shipments to North Africa, 15 million gallons. Time for America to replace Kasserine losses, 2 weeks. Time for Germany to accumulate equivalent supplies, 6 months, if convoys weren't sunk. These numbers told a story no tactical brilliance could overcome. The Afrika Korps scored its greatest tactical victory at the exact moment it discovered strategic defeat was inevitable. For Americans, Kasserine Pass was a painful lesson that led to rapid improvement. They replaced bad commanders, fixed their tactics, and better used their overwhelming material advantages. Within weeks, they turned defeat into a learning experience. For Germans, Kasserine was a wake-up call to impossibility. They won tactically but learned they'd already lost strategically. The supplies they captured gave them temporary relief while proving ultimate defeat was a mathematical certainty. Major Friedrich von Mellenthin, who served as intelligence officer throughout the campaign, wrote in his post-war memoir, Panzer Battles, "At Kasserine, we learned that the Americans could afford to lose a battle. We couldn't afford to win one. They replaced their losses in weeks. We couldn't replace our victories. This wasn't war as we understood it. It was industrial mathematics in uniform. The deeper truth revealed at Kasserine was that World War II had become a contest of industrial capacity, not military skill. The Wehrmacht, shaped by European campaigns where clever tactics could overcome material shortages, discovered in North Africa that industrial output determined outcomes more than battlefield brilliance. The captured American supplies showed a production system operating on principles German planners couldn't imagine. Where Germany chased efficiency, America chased redundancy. Where Germany conserved, America assumed waste. Where Germany calculated minimum needs, America multiplied everything by factors that seemed insane to scarcity-minded Germans. A captured American logistics manual specified ammunition expenditures that exceeded entire German campaign allocations. Artillery units were allowed to fire suppression barrages, using more shells than German units got for targeted attacks. This wastefulness seemed criminal to German officers who hoarded every round. The impact on German morale was worse than any material loss. Soldiers who believed in German technical superiority found American equipment that was not just abundant but often better. Sherman tanks that were more reliable than German Panthers, radios that worked better than German comms gear, rations that beat anything German soldiers had eaten since before the war. Letters home, those that survived censorship and bombing, showed how demoralized they were. Soldiers wrote of American chocolate bars that were better than German children's Christmas presents, medical supplies that could have saved German wounded who died for lack of basic meds, fuel wastage that exceeded German allocations. Joseph Goebbels's propaganda ministry eventually stopped trying to spin North Africa positively. Even he knew soldiers who'd seen American abundance couldn't be convinced Germany was winning with words alone. As the final perimeter around Tunis shrank in early May 1943, German forces took stock of their situation. They were operating almost entirely on captured equipment, burning captured fuel, firing captured ammunition. The Afrika Korps that had entered Africa as the Wehrmacht's elite was now completely dependent on enemy largesse. The surrender on May 13, 1943, was almost anticlimactic. German forces had run out of fuel, ammo, food, and hope. They surrendered to an enemy who could afford to be generous in victory, because victory had been guaranteed by industrial production long before the last shot was fired. General Hans Georg, the last commander of the Afrika Korps, put it simply, we were defeated by superior material. But that understated the truth. They were defeated by a system that could afford to lose what Germany couldn't afford to win, that could waste what Germany couldn't acquire, that could replace in days what Germany couldn't produce in months. The Battle of Kasserine Pass entered American military history as a defeat that taught valuable lessons about combat readiness and tactical coordination. Within weeks, the U.S. Army reformed, bringing in commanders like George Patton and putting into practice hard-learned lessons about concentrating force and combined arms. But for the Germans who won the battle, Kasserine meant something far deeper. The moment tactical victory revealed strategic impossibility. The supplies they captured let them keep fighting, while proving long-term victory was mathematically impossible. Veterans who survived captivity and returned to Germany after the war often said Kasserine was when they knew Germany would lose, not because the tactical situation was bad, but because of the industrial arithmetic revealed by those captured supplies. In 2003, on the 60th anniversary of Kasserine Pass, the last surviving German officer from the battle, a former lieutenant who wished to remain anonymous, said this: "We captured enough fuel to operate for days, enough food to feast for weeks, enough ammunition to fight battles. But we also captured understanding. The Americans could lose such quantities without caring. We couldn't acquire such quantities even with our greatest efforts. We were fighting against mathematical certainty disguised as military operations. Those 57,000 gallons of fuel we seized were both our salvation and our doom. Salvation because they let us keep resisting, doom because they proved resistance was futile. We'd gotten a glimpse of American industrial power, and we knew no amount of German courage could beat American arithmetic. Kasserine taught the Americans how to fight. It taught us we'd already lost. Both lessons were true, but ours was final." The Afrika Korps's capture of American supply dumps at Kasserine Pass in February 1943 was Germany's last significant tactical victory in North Africa. The 57,000 gallons of fuel, 183 tanks, 512 vehicles, and tons of supplies they seized let them keep fighting when they otherwise couldn't. But within that tactical triumph lay strategic disaster. The captured supplies revealed an industrial gap so vast that no amount of tactical skill could overcome it. German forces discovered they weren't fighting the U.S. Army, they were fighting the United States itself, its factories, its farms, its endless capacity to produce and replace. The math was merciless. While German forces celebrated capturing 57,000 gallons of fuel, America was shipping millions of gallons monthly to North Africa. While Germans carefully maintained captured Shermans, America was making 1,350 of them every month. While German soldiers treasured captured American rations, American production could feed armies and still destroy surplus to keep prices stable. At Kasserine Pass, the Afrika Korps won a battle that proved the war was lost. They captured supplies that showed they couldn't supply themselves. They achieved tactical victory that revealed strategic defeat was inevitable. They discovered that in modern industrial warfare, countries that could afford to abandon 57,000 gallons of fuel would always defeat countries that couldn't afford to acquire it. The legacy of Kasserine Pass is vastly different for winners and losers. For Americans, it was a harsh lesson that led to rapid improvement and eventual triumph. For Germans, it was a revelation that courage and skill meant nothing against industrial mathematics, that tactical excellence couldn't overcome strategic impossibility, that they were fighting not armies but arithmetic, and arithmetic always wins. In the end, those 57,000 gallons of captured American fuel told the entire story of World War II, not in battles won or lost, but in the capacity to wage modern war. The Afrika Korps had captured proof of their own defeat, seized evidence of impossibility, and won a victory that proved victory was impossible. They had discovered in abandoned American supply dumps in the Tunisian desert the mathematical certainty of the Third Reich's destruction.